Hello everyone who just likes to cram all day long. I am BorderWise and welcome back to From the Depths. Updated cram tutorials, the final one for now, probably. So in all the previous tutorials we've done, in the little mini-series we're doing here in the merry year of 2025, your mileage may vary on how merry it actually is. We've covered the basics. We've covered what CRAMs are, their Tetris, various kinds of wacky CRAMs. But now we have to get down to the nitty-gritty of how to use them. So it's optimization, it's use, it's all that kind of weird stuff. Like how to really get the best bang for your buck, literally, with CRAMs. So yeah. To start off with, while we watch this merry battle between a bulwark and my optimized cram canoe thing, we should probably talk about da pellets. Da pellets are everything in cram cannons, and it is helpful to know what their job is, so to speak, because you don't use the same pellets for the same job, that's for sure, and different pellet combinations are more or less good at different gauges, at different sizes of cram, and just at different packing densities, so to speak. So, we're going to delete that bulwark, as delightful as this fight is, and talk about pellets a little bit. So, let's go here to the build menu. Let's talk about the pellets, because I haven't really discussed the pellets and their pros and cons, because all of them are actually pretty good. Like, if you get a big enough cram, firing any of a mix of these things, it can work pretty well. You can even have all of them in a single cram, and, well, it'll do cram stuff, if you've done everything else right. But in order of importance, not necessarily, this isn't a tier list of pellets or anything like that, because like I said, all of them are good in their own way. The most important one is hardener pellets. And the simple reason for that is that hardener pellets are all cram pellets improve the health of the cram shell when they're packed into the shell. They all do that, but hardened pellets do that a lot more, and they increase AP and kinetic damage, which is very useful for the, well, I guess standard use of cram, which is having an armor-piercing shell that penetrates the target and explodes inside it. You need hardener pellets in order to do that effectively, and also you need enough health on the shell to get it to zip past all the active defenses, which annoyingly things tend to have. So hardeners most important. Following up are HE pellets and frag pellets. HE pellets, more so, this is effective at pretty much any gauge. Diminishing returns when it gets really big, like basically when you've hit the explosive radius of about 35 meters, that is the hard cap on it. The explosion radius can't get any bigger than that, and you might as well not put any more HE into it. But this works at lower gauges of cram, it works at smaller cram sizes, particularly combined with hardeners. The default cram that kind of works at any gauge is about 50%, maybe 2/3 hardener, and the rest HE. Slap that with a time after first impact fuse, and you've got a pretty decent cram cannon, along with the other, along with good Tetris and best practices and stuff like that. Then you have frag pellets, which is worse than HE at lower packing and lower gauges, but is much better at much higher gauges. So if you set this to 180 degrees, set it with a timed fuse, or set it with a penetration type shell, if you get this really big, you can have like frags of that do tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of damage, which just does so much kinetic damage that it whistles straight through like blocks of heavy armor and stuff like that. Very, very nice against big armor targets. And then you get EMP pellets and incendiary pellets. EMP is something that's kind of underutilized by cram cannons a lot, largely because EMP is just a finicky damage type in general, but it's a nice spice to put on any kind of cram which is designed to literally hit its target, because it's just that extra little thing. Maybe your cram penetrates the target, explodes near an AI compartment or batteries or lasers, something like that, and that EMP will just jump the distance to the nearest block and fry something important, and that's very helpful. It's also great for zapping local weapon controllers if you hit a turret directly. Incendiary is in a similar boat. It's like pretty much, it shouldn't be the main attraction of your cram cannon, but a smidge of burny can help do like persistent damage in a prolonged fight, and CRAMs can have stupid amounts of fuel on their incendiary pellets, and they can also just, like, there's no reason not to set it to max intensity, which is the armor piercing the flame, maximum of 40 with incendiary pellets, which means that they will burn through metal like no tomorrow. Unfortunately, they will not burn through heavy armor like no tomorrow because it has a fire resistance of 60. So yeah, that's your pellets. And one strong CRAM is generally better than a whole bunch of weaker CRAMs, whether it's spread out over your ship or all in the same turret, which is why this CRAMcraft you see before you has 4 big turrets, each one with a single firing piece. This is not a hard and fast rule, it is just a recommended guideline, and you really don't, like, there's not much justification for, like, a proper CRAM cannon to have more than two firing pieces per turret. You can do fancy things like mixing up the pellets. One can fire first with weapon synchronization and just be pure hardener and act as like a spoof for the follow-up, more damaging but less durable shell. I've done that before, that can work really well. Or you can just have one really strong shell that doesn't need spoofing at all, so your mileage may vary. And according to people done the math, I mentioned this before, about 10 to 25-ish packing time has highest DPS efficiency. I tend to shoot for roughly 20 seconds because that's just a nice convenient number to remember. And if you have multiple CRAM cannons on your ship, you have no reason whatsoever to not have them do different jobs. So, turning the UI back on, observe these stripy barrels. You will notice that if you look at the pellets of this CRAM cannon, it is mostly harder, with a fair amount of HE and a smidge of EMP. This CRAM's job is to penetrate the target, do a lot of explosive damage, and also just act as like a nice damage sponge. It has 55,000 health, which is pretty decent for a CRAM cannon. Not ideal. If you're wondering how big these CRAM cannons are, they're like essentially, what are they? They are 9 by 9, and not counting the turret, the rest of the turret block, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7, 9 by 9.7 3D Tetris, so not volume efficient, but nice and material efficient, which is why this thing is cheaper than the bulwark it was just shooting at, and absolutely rocking its socks, which is what we like to see. Also, pardon the mantlet deco, I just got carried away. This guy, on the other hand, is slightly different, because it is actually a bigger CRAM cannon. I'm not a fan of turret necks, you've probably noticed. This is, I don't know, like a good third bigger than the smaller CRAM in front of it, which means it's not AP, HE, EMP, it's just AP frag, mostly hardener. It's about, what is that, 2/3 hardener to 1/3 frag, 62,000 frag damage per fragment, 180 degrees, lots of kinetic damage, 90,000 shell health, very, very nice. And there's 4 of these things, or more accurately, 2 of the smaller AP, HE, EMP guns, and 2 monster, well, reasonably monstrous AP frag guns. We like it. So yeah, multiple CRAMs, different jobs, mix up your CRAM, you will, I don't know, I think you'll do better. And, yeah, so you might be wondering why I bothered to build a whole-as ship for this final tutorial. Well, using CRAM cannons, more so than any other weapon type in From the Depths, requires designing a vehicle specifically for that. I have multiple times in my From the Depths experience, like, taken CRAMs and swapped them out for APS, or the other way around, and I can tell you straight up, CRAMs kind of need vehicles tailored for them, because of just the weird things about CRAMs. In particular, vehicles that use CRAMs need to hit a kind of sweet spot in terms of speed and maneuverability versus stability and also heading in the right direction to not stuff up their CRAM shell. Now, what do I mean by that? CRAMs really need a stable firing platform. You can see in the, on the right side of the screen, the stability stat just under the speed stat. By the way, if you can't see that, where is it? It's view and control. No, where is it? UI vehicle info. Alright, so it's here. You'll see the stability thing. If you don't see stability in your own game, just tick that box and make sure that you can see it. And that's affecting how accurate all your weapons are. So, this is a fairly stable firing platform, so that's good for our cram cannons, because they miss enough as it is. You don't want to put cram cannons, in particular, on something that like drives like crazy and is erratic and has a very low stability, because cram cannons miss enough as it is, even if they have flawless accuracy. So, you want a nice stable firing platform, so can't go too fast, can't change direction too quickly, and also you want to make sure you don't go so fast that you run away from the target, fire backwards, and ruin your muzzle velocity. Now, pretty much, I am told every weapon in From the Depths... Why did I do that? I am told that every weapon in From the Depths that has a muzzle velocity, so not lasers or particle cannons, because they're hit scan, does inherit the velocity of the parent vehicle. The thing is, it's barely noticeable with things like missiles, because they're self-propelled, and advanced cannons, because they generally have a pretty quick muzzle velocity, or with flamethrowers, because you're firing them at pretty close range anyway, like 400 meters or below. With cram cannons, it is noticeable, because their shells are slow, and they tend to have to arc onto the target a lot. So, found out the hard way many times that if you fire backwards from a fast craft using cram cannons, those cram cannons are going to be annoyingly slow, and it puts an annoyingly hard speed limit on a broadsiding cram craft. So with APS, you can have them as fast as you damn well please, and especially if you have lasers or packs, about below 50 meters per second is about as fast as you want a broadsiding cram craft to be, because otherwise it's going to ruin its own shell muzzle velocity by just firing slightly other than forwards. Past 90 degrees backwards, it starts to ruin it. So, sweet spot, speed, like below 50 meters per second, like 40 meters per second is pretty decent for a cram ship, I tend to find. Nice and stable, so you don't want it wiggling around too much like crazy, but nice and maneuverable. That will help you a lot. However, if you've got something that fills all that criteria, I'm just going to throw a bunch of warriors against this thing. Otherwise, we're not going to see enough cram fire happening, and that's embarrassing. So, if you fill all that criteria, you will probably realize that, like, oh, that is putting you in the range, like, in the speed and, like, erraticness range of being vulnerable to crams yourself. So, a good cram craft needs to be defended well against crams, which is why this thing has a pretty decent LAM system. It's not, I don't know, not award-winning LAM system. I'm not even sure who hands out these awards. Probably Nick Smart. So it's got this kind of chunky 4x4 Tetris in there with a little bit of like single cavity spam in there with some big engines to keep it going. Even then, not perfect. But it has that, and it also has Diff CWIS, which is this weird APS contraption right there. And I made a whole tutorial on those, but the short version is maximum shell limit 500mm 10-meter long shell squished into the firing piece directly. Big flak shell. It shoots incoming cram shells and annihilates them and keeps your ship safe from cram shells. Important. Also, things like interceptors and CWIS works. Like Diff CWIS is just very convenient to use. And yeah, so this craft, I feel, is a pretty decent showcase of that. Not perfect, because like I made it specifically for this tutorial. It is fast enough that it can get to the range it likes to be, so it likes to hang out at just under 2,000 meters, which is like about as far away from a target as you want a cram craft to be, because any further than that, you are going to start missing a lot. It has azipods on it, and seriously, azipods are like so useful for making ships maneuverable. It's not even funny. Okay, it is a little funny. So this thing corners quite well. It doesn't drive too far away from the target and have trouble turning. That is always a big concern with big ships, is that they always struggle to turn. So azipods, really good for stuff like this. And big lambs, CWIS, all that kind of stuff. So this is like a pretty well optimized cram craft, I would say, and it is a nice example of this. Another thing I should mention is, like, along with stability, you do want your barrels to be as long as you can possibly stand. To have, I don't know how many people will object to this kind of barrel guard wedge thing, clippy thing on the front here, but meh, it's okay. So yeah, like, you want your barrels as long as possible, as long as you can stand aesthetically, and as long as your craft can handle, because there's a thing with barrels, especially CRAM barrels. So, if we go here, you'll notice that this barrel has a weight of 80, which is twice the weight of a metal block. And don't even talk to me about heavy barrels, because they are twice as heavy as the regular barrels. So basically, one heavy barrel is like a full-ass metal beam just hanging on the front of your turret, making it really imbalanced. So, that's not great. We don't like that. So, that goes for APS as well, although even APS, the barrels are a lot lighter, so one barrel is the weight of a metal block, and a heavy barrel is, I don't know, just still a lot lighter than the weight of a CRAM barrel. So that's another reason, that's another advantage that APS has over CRAMs, is that APS is actually lighter, weirdly enough. CRAMs are quite heavy. However, there is a way of dealing with this. Perhaps less so with these, like, delicious Canadian lumberjack breakfast pancake turrets that I'm so fond of using. But this goes for any kind of turret which has a long, heavy barrel. I'm just going to hop into my Funcraft folder. I never intended for this thing to see the light of day in a video or a tutorial, but, like, how can you resist? Let's shoot at a Marauder, because that's fun. So this little slim canoe thing, I was just making this for fun and giggles, but it had a problem with rolling over, because it's, like, very, very thin. It's literally just 2 meters of wooden armor, because, you know, for the means. I wouldn't actually take this thing into the campaign, but it's just fun to, like, mess around and have something that can shoot a Marauder sometimes. But this thing kept rolling over thanks to its barrels being so much heavier than the rest of it. It was a bit of a problem. And then, like, stumbling on the big brain move of, well, the turret cap isn't really protecting the firing piece anyway, you might as well make it of lead to balance the thing out. So, you'll see that the mass of this turret is almost, but not quite, over the turret block itself, which is the thing it's rotating around. This, like I said, this can work for APS as well, but especially for CRAMs, you want to balance them so the stability of your craft is not compromised by the turrets turning, because that is bad. That will, if nothing else, make your craft uncontrollable, especially if it's small and light like this, but also it will expose your deck armor to enemy fire, and that's really bad. So that's another handy-dandy trick, is you counterweight your turrets so the barrel doesn't make it fall over. I believe that's actually done historically in real life. They found out the hard way that when they were first making warships with turrets, is that if you've got long steel barrels, swing the turret around, it causes the ship to roll. There's some unpleasantness that resulted from that until they learned to balance the turrets out, I believe. So now, we also got to talk about detection a little bit. You'll notice this thing has a little token mortar back here for fun and reasons. That is not aiming very well, unfortunately, but that's okay. So detection. I've already mentioned in the mortar tutorial the optimal detection for that, which is about one... let's hop over onto the detection here. That'd be a good idea. Okay, so what we got here. So this thing has, well, this detection. The default detection settings of 211 for speed, bearing, and range actually works kind of okay for CRAMs. It's just equally decent with most things. But if you want to make it a little bit more suited to CRAM cannons, especially against the kind of things that CRAMs are good at shooting at, 322 seems to work pretty well as well. And for mortars, you set it to what the Onyx Watch Anvil uses, which is 1, 1.8, 1.8, because then it has a lot of time for bearing and range, and doesn't care about speed so much, because it is arcing and tracking the thing. So, I'm going to set this back to what I had it, because that's nice, and we should probably talk about the mortar, since we're talking about it. Now, a lot of people in the mortar tutorial, in this particular series, told me about the anvil, specifically the Onyx Watch Anvil, which will spawn in as emotional support on my team so it doesn't kill us immediately. Where are you, anvil? Where are you, anvil? There you are. There you are. Please don't spawn right on top of us. That would be bad. Damn it. I have reflexes like a cat in order to save my stupid ship. Where are you, my friend? There you are. So that guy has mortar bread that we will look at in a hot second, but I have a much simpler mortar bread to show you first. Now, turn this on. This little mortar is controlled by bread. You will notice that the muzzle velocity of this is only... Where the hell is the muzzle velocity on here? Hello? Hello? Where is it? Am I blind? Where is it? Show me. Shell speed, 70 meters per second. You might be wondering why it's so low. It clearly wasn't that low before. Well, there is a secret here. The secret being, if we go here to breadboards, we have some very basic bread. All this does is that it basically makes it so the further away a target is, the faster the mortar's muzzle velocity is, which is very handy. So, over here we have our generic block setter, which is over here, just below the center of the new component inventory. It is set to control a firing piece that is named Mortar, and it is affecting the CRAM's muzzle velocity. So a note on block naming, I should mention, if you go to a block and hit Shift-N, you can name it. This one is named Mortar, and that allows breadboards and ACBs to effectively control very specific blocks rather than just all blocks of one type. Super duper handy. Can recommend. Real game changer. So working backwards from here, what we have here is a constant input of 70. This feeds into a sum function. So constant is here, sum is there. Over here we have a multiplier, which again, here, is where you find it. And then we have target, I guess what would you call it? So primary target info. And from the primary target info, we've got the target distance, which feeds into the multiplier and then feeds into the sum. So if this thing is like X meters away, it gets reduced a little bit, just 5% of that is added to 70, and that affects the muzzle velocity. So I'm going to make the anvil vanish for a second. Actually, I don't need to. I can do this. I have the power. Let's spawn in an indestructible bastion, because that's funny. Okay, we won't spawn an indestructible bastion. We'll spawn in instead, an indestructible bastion. Much better than an indestructible bastion. Alright, so you'll notice over here, our friend here has now got a shell speed of about 170 meters per second. This guy needs additional muzzle velocity because this mortar has a habit of firing backwards, which is irritating, but, you know, that's how you go. So we go look at the bread now. Let's go look at the bread. You'll see there's numbers happening in here. So the thing is about, well, that many meters away, and through that sum, it turns into that sum, adds to that, and then you get a nice constant mortar speed that is constantly adjusting for how far away it is. Now, the anvil has breadboard that is way more friggin' complicated than this, and I dare you to try and reverse engineer it, because I'm not going to. So let's go here, breadboard, so we've got PIDs, and then we got the mortar mods. So this thankfully has descriptions of all this stuff. It actually has real maths equations in here, which I'm not going to frickin' touch. I mean, look at this nonsense. So these mortars are doing wacky things like changing their muzzle velocity depending on how far away something is, but also they're doing things, and I just know this by looking at the notes here. So the shell, like these can switch between firing at high angles or low angles, and like, yeah, if the target's right above us, the mortars will switch to a low firing angle and fire the shells at maximum velocity, essentially turning into anti-aircraft guns. There's very cunning things you can do with mortars. And like with CRAMs in general, using bread, there's a lot of things you can mess with. You can possibly even, like, yeah, you can even change the fuses depending on what you're doing. So, breadboard actually goes well with mortars, and that's just a general thing in From the Depths, is that even something that is relatively straightforward, like CRAM cannons. I say relatively, there's nothing friggin' like simple and straightforward in this game. But even something like CRAM cannons, which are considered a more beginner-friendly weapon than, say, advanced cannons or something like that, you can do wacky things with them with bread. So, like, it's worth learning to bake. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And yeah, that just that just about does it for cram cannons themselves and how to optimize your use for them. But I should mention as well, like the whole speed limit on crams I mentioned earlier. That is for broadsiders. Frontsiders, with all their crams pointing forward, can go as fast as they like, so long as they don't backpedal too much. And I will demonstrate that with one of the scarier things that the Onyx Watch can throw at you. The Eerie is not perfect, but it is what I consider to be an ideal cram frontsider. A rushdown craft that gets to its preferred distance, it stays there, you can see here. It goes at roughly 50 meters per second, so it is actually moving at a speed that is still comfortable for its crams to aim at. Driving forward, all its crams pointing. These are big. These crams are bigger than they look, by the way. Just to give you an idea, we go in the middle here. It's very compact, but these cram cannons like go all the way into damn near the center of the ship. So these crams on the sides and on the bottom, they're big. They are darn big, and they hurt. So yeah, something like the Eerie, ideal cramcraft. Now, how I would be remiss if I did not mention something important about crams, which is they are specialized. So that's the whole thing about crams. They are specialized for like big, slow targets, big, slow surface targets specifically. There's a lot of things in From the Depths in the campaign, in adventure mode, which does not fit that description and is therefore kind of hard to deal with. Those mortars are something else, I tell you. But, oh no, please don't go for the slim canoe. That'd be so rude. No, the slim canoe. We should save the slim canoe and go back to the thing I had in before. Where are you? You are here. And you are here. Optimize cram canoe. There we go. It's supplemental weapons. Now, this thing, like you can already see here, this thing technically has Seawiz, and that is a supplemental weapon, and it has a Lambs, which is a laser, just a defensive one. But yeah, it is important if you have a cramcraft that you mean to take into the campaign, or into adventure mode, or anything like that, that it has secondary weapons that compensate for Cram's weaknesses, of which they have a lot. Let's throw you against a whole bunch of nasty stuff. Let's throw you against a whole bunch of flying squirrels, why not? So, crams are useless against flying squirrels. You are going to have a very bad time hitting small, erratic craft with crams, even if they're well set up, or even if they fire quickly. So, what do you have instead? You have things like these tiny particle cannons. Hit-scan weapons like packs and lasers are really, really good paired with cram cannons, because they can do things that cram cannons cannot. You can see already like squirrel bits falling over there on the horizon. Very nice indeed. And in particular, packs are especially good, little secondaries like this, because they can also hit submarines, which crams struggle against as well. So yeah, lasers, like, crams and lasers are a vicious combination, because both of those things, set up correctly, could not give, like, you know, two great nuts about armor, so that's really good. This thing just blew its own face off. That's embarrassing. Boy. But anyway, we are slowly picking off those squirrels, but there is one weapon combination. By the way, crams synergize well with, honestly, probably most weapons except flamethrowers, because they have mostly the same job. So, like, see here. I would say that lasers, missiles, yep, missiles and crams kind of compete for the same niche of, like, compact firepower, but missiles almost, like, do different jobs to cram cannons anyway. Lasers, particle cannons synergize really well with crams because they do things the cram can't. Flamethrowers, not so much, because crams, both of these are kind of close-in weapons, and flamethrowers are better against, like, squishy, flammable targets, which crams tear straight through anyway. But advanced cannons are interesting. Advanced cannons go well with damn near everything because they're the most versatile weapon system in the game. Like, simple weapons are just simple weapons, and they're just simple, and that's their advantage. These things, there's a special trick with advanced cannons that can mean that, like, small crappy CRAMs can be way more useful than you might expect. Old school CRAM spam is still potentially viable if you tweak things correctly. So, let us spawn in, now that we know how to fly swat stuff with our CRAM craft, let's spawn in a special fortress. This I did not have time to make into a full craft. So, what we have here is a bad CRAM cannon. This thing is 2D Tetris. It has, let's have a look here, it has the side CRAMs have a shell health of about just under 4,000, which is nothing, it's pathetic. But the middle one has a shell health of less than 2,000, which is like more than twice as pathetic. But it also has these funny little APS here. What is going on here? First thing I'm going to do is delete those to demonstrate to you what the hell, like, you know, the whole point of this. So, let's go here. Where's my friend the Alcazar? We love our friend the Alcazar. So, these tiny crappy CRAMs get annihilated by the lambs that the Alcazar has. The Alcazar is a real good, like, because it's a regular difficulty craft, but it is, like, so defensive with all these massive air gaps, and there's surprisingly beefy lambs in here. Doesn't look like that much, but it is enough to fry a lot of CRAM shells, especially ones that are not big or strong enough. So, this CRAM is never, ever going to get through that lamb system, not without some help. The help in question is smoke. Because APS is, I guess, unique amongst all weapon types, like no other weapon type can do this, is they can fire smoke at enemies. This particular APS turret, there's two of them just for giggles, is a belt-fed loader. It is 200mm, has a modest fire rate of like just under 30 rounds per minute, but the shell is where the fun happens. It is a sabot smoke shell. It is not that quick. It's also got no rail draw, so yeah, it's just over like 700 meters per second. It does not great kinetic damage, but the smoke releases a smoke cloud upon shell detonation. It will only do this if it is of gauge 0.2 meters or 20 centimeters or higher. That is why these things are 200mm. Any lower, and you'll see down here the smoke. What? Where is the smoke? Show me the smoke. Interesting that smoke doesn't vanish immediately. Interesting. I'm getting distracted. Oh, hold on. It's 196 is when it shows up. That's the slowest you can go. But 200mm is nice and easy to remember, so you'll see here each smoke cloud that this thing spawns reduces laser intensity by about however that much is, about 8%. I believe smoke clouds stack on each other, so if you get a whole bunch of smoke onto one lamb's node, you're going to reduce the intensity of whatever laser comes out of that by X%. So if you crank this up to 500mm, you get something like this. If you stack a bunch of smoke warheads, you get a similar thing. I find it's better to have a lot of smaller smoke shells and just fire them quickly, because if they're too big, the lamb's system will shoot them down, and that's not good because the smoke that's just spawned in midair does absolutely nothing, and that's no good. So, this weakens lasers, but I hear you cry, BorderWise, your standard laser system has very high intensity. 60 intensity, as a matter of fact, so if we just very quickly have a laser system like so. So you see here, by default it has 60 intensity, and even if you put a Q switch on it, it has 40. So, how is reducing like 40 by like 8% going to do anything? Particularly given that shells and all projectiles have an armor of 20, which means that you'll need to drop the AP of a laser, or the intensity of a laser, sorry, down to past below 20 in order to reduce the damage it does. Well, firstly, if you stack enough smoke, you can get it to below 20 intensity, but there's another trick here. There is a sneaky thing, which may or may not be useful in the future. It depends on what the campaign designers and contributors do. Laser anti-munition defenses, by default, have this unchecked. So, should we fire through smoke? I always set this to yes, just so my own smoke dispensers don't screw with my munition defense, but by default, this is turned off. This means that if a smoke cloud is spawned on a LAMS node, there is a chance, if whoever has built the thing has not checked that, that the LAMS will not fire at all. That is very, very useful, particularly against in the early game against the Honest Watch, where you might not be able to afford giant Doom CRAMs that can punch through their LAMS. You might be stuck with stuff like this, but some cheap smoke guns can make the difference between your CRAM shells not hitting at all and your CRAM shells actually doing something. So you'll see here, we've now managed to smoke these. Let's see here. Is that smoked? Yes. It is now smoked. So now those LAMS nodes are not firing because whoever made the Alcazar, bearing in mind this is kind of an old vehicle, did not check that button. That is quite useful. So now you have this rather crappy triple CRAM. Now it is absolutely tearing up the Alcazar, at least on the surface, because it has its little smoke friends out to help it. So that is the final CRAM trick. I've used that in ages gone by, back when all CRAMs had to worry about were LAMS, and back in the days when smoke reduced laser damage. So it's not as useful now, but it still is kind of useful because it can literally turn LAMS nodes off, and it does weaken the laser if you get a whole bunch of smoke in the same place. Like you can imagine, if you have a whole bunch of smoke guns, maybe they're firing very rapidly, or maybe they're set up to different AI, so they just cover various parts of it in thick layers of smoke. You can really reduce the ability of an enemy craft's LAMS to do anything. Bear in mind that you'll see this info thing up here. Smoke does interfere with your own laser targeters and your own cameras. So let's see here. Whoops! Ah, God! So if we go here, this thing right here. So anything visual. So if we go here, coincidence rangefinders. This, like, anything that has a kind of a camera in it, so rangefinders and cameras, and like a camera 360, retroreflection sensor, telescope, and the laser rangefinder, those get screwed up by smoke. So if you're going to have smoke guns on your craft for any reason, you're going to really want to invest in things like radars, or radars, radar trackers, IR cameras, and like passive radars, kind of that kind of thing. So basically, radars and infrared will be your go-to, which might ruin the ability of your CRAM to have good bearing detection, but it could be worth it if an Alcazar is giving you a run for your money. So yeah, that's CRAM optimization in a nutshell. Of course, there is a lot more I could talk about, but that can be in follow-up videos. If you think I've missed something, do say what you think I've missed. I'm eager to hear it. And yeah, that will do for 2025 CRAM tutorials until everything gets updated again and everything gets shook up, I suppose. So thank you all so much for watching this whole little CRAM series, which I hope you have. You better have, otherwise this video would be kind of confusing. Thank you all so much. And please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Support me on Patreon or YouTube membership if you like. It really helps, and there's fun perks in it for you. Thank you to all my current supporters, which you can hang out with on the official Patreon Discord. Starting at the lowest tier, you get access to the Discord. We can talk about CRAMs all day, or anything else, really. And do check out my other channels. They are good. Video game channel, video game streaming channel, art channel, and Twitch channel, which I stream on regularly. So, hope to see you all there. Have a wonderful crammy day. Farewell.